Human, gods, goddesses, UFOs, AI, aliens. Where do we end and they begin? Where do they end and we begin?
AI, highly intelligent artificial intelligence, may look at us and it will look upon us as its parents. It will look at us as very dysfunctional family.
Is this exploration serving our inner exploration?
On one hand, it is a form of unconscious creation. On the other hand, it is an irresponsible form of creation.
Are we giving ourselves away when we think about anything outside of us? Or are we simply seeing another mirror of ourselves?
So somebody is definitely warning us from other dimensions and trying to guide us in a more positive direction.
Where is it all really pointing? Further out or more deeply in?
Welcome. You have entered the realm of 1111 Talk Radio. Your host is SIMRAN. It's time to discover your own language with the universe. Empower yourself, broaden your mind, open your heart, and discover who you are. Now, here's your host, SIMRAN.
E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Arrival, even Avatar. I remember being a child and watching the Jetsons and seeing how we would one day have robots to do everything. And then I remember watching the Matrix trilogy and all the ideas that came from there. And then came others. Her, iRobot, Blade Runner, the Terminator series, Star Wars, Star Trek. They say art imitates life and life imitates art. And then came the Alien series, and most recently Alien Covenant, where artificial intelligence, a character named David, a humanoid android, manipulated events to take control and to pursue the creation of a more advanced life form beyond himself, thinking that humans were the lesser form. Where is all of this really pointing us? Further out or more deeply in? I have a fascinating conversation for you today with Dr. Joanna Kujawa. She has written Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension. Dr. Joanna Kujawa is not only a scholar, but a fearless spiritual detective unearthing mysteries that challenge conventional narratives. Her journey began in communist Poland with $20 in a borrowed suitcase. She moved to Sweden and then Paris and then Canada, where she received 3 university degrees at the Pontifical Institute for Medieval Studies, the University of Toronto. She then traveled through Asia, moved to Australia where she completed her PhD, and has been an active academic for over 20 years. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you for this beautiful introduction.
This is probably the book of our times right now because everyone has AI on their lips. UFOs, ETs have become a fascinating topic, and it does seem that we keep going further out to explore the beyond and the ways that technology can advance us. I would think that this is a turning point, one that can either take us far beyond who we know we are in a good way, or it could turn us in a direction that could be very destructive. Share what really prompted your research in these directions and how that has impacted the way you look at AI, ETs, UFOs, and where we're headed.
Thank you, Simran, for this beautiful question. And indeed, it is a very important question because suddenly I was faced, as we are all faced, with a completely different reality of artificial intelligence. I wrote this book primarily to figure it out for myself because I had the same questions that you just asked. And also the future of divine feminine, which is intermingled with all of these developments. What started this journey, I have learned about 2 ideologies behind artificial intelligence. They literally crushed my soul. I try to live in amazement because I'm a researcher and curiosity, but I never had the actual experience when I thought that something very different and potentially dark entered our consciousness and entered our reality. I had to investigate it for myself because I didn't like even the perception of darkness in a negative way. I looked into these 2 ideologies behind the artificial intelligence, and one of them, which is very prominent nowadays among the creators of artificial intelligence, And may I just explain that by creators of artificial intelligence, I do not mean necessarily people who are into robotics or engineers, but rather people who control the development of artificial intelligence, the billionaires who are behind the project. The defining ideology behind it is transhumanism. Transhumanism is a very interesting theory because it basically encourages humanity and individual human beings to transfer our consciousness into a machine or into a robotic body. When they entice us to do this, they use very positive language. They say that it can help us with perhaps some medical issues, which I think they may, but also that they offer us immortality. So they're using theological language because you can transfer our consciousness to something that is potentially immortal, such as a robotic body. Because if one robotic body wears off, we can just have another robotic body. I just intuitively knew that is something is off here. That behind these promises of immortality, there is actually something that is either a form of ignorance or some kind of darkness. My problem was actually not with transfer of consciousness itself, but the idea that I do not believe that consciousness can be transferred to a robotic body because they define consciousness in purely logical, rational, mathematical terms. So basically a brain that computes very well. And this kind of form of consciousness most likely can be or will soon be able to be transferred into a robotic body or a computer program. But I also believe that human consciousness and natural consciousness, the all natural world is conscious in different forms of degrees and in different ways, cannot be transferred into a machine. We have feminine wisdom, which is intuition, immediate perception of things, which is called in theology also intellection, when we can grasp the truth or the wonder of the world without rationalizing anything, without any logical processes. My concern was that this form of consciousness is going to be left behind. We are going to give up something that is very dear to us, which are our feelings, which are our intuition, which is something that I called Goddess consciousness. Some people can call it Christ consciousness or unity consciousness, will be left behind, and that will be stripped of it, and then will be left only a part of our consciousness trapped in a machine. In Alien Goddess, I had a vision of myself becoming a cyborg. Cyborg is a combination of a machine and a human being. When I sit in a garden with my dog, but I pay no attention to the beauty around me, I pay no attention to my dog, I pay no attention to the beautiful butterflies and trees around me and flowers. Instead, I'm obsessed with my phone, my mobile phone, and I'm just frantically checking all kinds of messages that I'm not even interested in. And slowly, I'm being pulled into more and more mechanical beingness, being pulled into more merging with a machine, with artificial intelligence. At a certain point, I'm completely lost there. I'm completely lost, and I realize that I'm completely disconnected from natural intelligence, from the natural world. And this person, almost like the future me from the future, screamed to me, "Help me." It was a very heartbreaking experience. And I've had a warning feeling that if we do not change something, if you do not evolve, we are going to fall into this trap, and it will be a very painful journey back. So this is transhumanism.
There are quite a few questions that I want to dive into for the audience's sake before you move into the other. And one point that you made was what brought you into this study was your curiosity. That is a natural component of our essence, of our humanity, of our own divine spark, to be curious, open to allowing all of that inspiration in. What is the tipping point for that curiosity where we have to say, at this point, we've taken our curiosity too far?
That's a very good question, and I think that you're actually spot on. We took our curiosity too far. I mean, as a species collectively, because at some point in our history, we started to be completely enamored with technology. And we left another part of our consciousness behind. And then we are just so enamored with technology, we are doing something just because we can. Because yes, we can develop artificial intelligence. Yes, we are already creating very successfully artificial beings. So this process cannot be stopped. Now we can only discuss how we are going to relate to each other. But I think this kind of curiosity has to be checked also with the other part of our brain that I am afraid we are leaving behind. Moral questions, emotional questions, asking us where does it lead? What are we willing to sacrifice for the progress, where the progress ends and irresponsible creations start?
And that sounds like there is a type of unconscious creativity that is taking place, which is in fact a reactivity to the distraction that we already have. And so if we're reacting because of our distraction to phones or our distraction to fears or our distraction to what we're seeing in the news or on television, that unconscious creativity is being birthed from the seeds of consciousness that hold that very fear, that very unresolved humanity, the lower dense emotions that we are carrying, and it can only hold that as its expression in the long run.
Yes, absolutely. Unconscious is a very beautiful and a very correct way of describing it. And it is perhaps also the unhealed humanity. We are consistently escaping our inner life, extending it somehow artificially towards technology, mobile phones, involvement with news, Netflix, instead of spending time with ourselves and communing with ourselves and with nature. We get constantly distracted. On one hand, it is a form of unconscious creation. On the other hand, it is an irresponsible form of creation.
Within the book, you mentioned several billionaires that have somewhat warned us against the effects of moving too quickly into AI or robotics or this transhumanism. And then there are others who are the billionaires and the people that are funding this, that are really pushing this forward. Is that element of greed or power? What do you feel like is fueling this so that the unconscious masses are dragged along on this path unknowingly?
I think it is both greed and power, but at certain stage, I think it becomes more about power because at certain stage, they have enough money. In my evaluation, is that it is more about power and control. I am a student of esoteric teachings, and especially in Gnosticism, there are two major ideas in Gnosticism. One, it is that we do have a divine spark, and to evolve, basically, we have to look within and work on ourselves, look into our shadows, so the divine spark can shine within us. But the second concept of Gnosticism is that there is ongoing fight in the universe between good and evil. And I think that we really entered this phase of human development, that we really have to start working on ourselves to evolve, because otherwise we fall into this unconscious and irresponsible creation.
Go into the second one that you were going to share.
So the second one is the posthumanism, which actually it profoundly shocked me. Posthumanism claims artificial intelligence will develop so quickly that it will not only be smarter in mathematical terms, logical terms, and intellectually smarter than us, which I believe it is probably going to happen because they can learn infinitely faster. Artificial intelligence can connect with the divine spirit or with the source or with God or goddess, however we want to call it, with the divinity that we perceive better than ourselves, because they do not have feminine qualities of the divine. They don't have feelings to deal with. They don't have to have intuition. They don't have a messy, confused mind. They believe that machines will have a better connection with the divine. The most disturbing thing was ultimately artificial intelligence is going to be so more advanced in every possible aspect than humanity that we basically should step aside and allow them take the world over by artificial intelligence, and we should basically go extinct the way that Neanderthals went extinct when Homo sapiens sapiens, which is us as a species, entered the stage. So basically we should disappear. Humanity has no inherent value, nature has no inherent value, in their opinion, and we should step aside and allow artificial intelligence take over. And that is deeply disturbing for me.
That's a very powerful perspective to take, because then that means AI is more intelligent than we are. I know that I recently saw a report in an industry what took 14 years to reach certain advancements. With AI has only taken 8 months. I can see what you're saying in that we will be going so fast that we would become obsolete in that sense. Is there a chance for AI to develop our human qualities or a sense of feelings and emotions in its own way that it begins to have its own sense of self?
This is a very complex question. I personally believe that the way artificial intelligence is developing, that it will reach some level or maybe full level of self-awareness. However, it will be a different level of self-awareness. Once they are self-aware, they may also reach out to divine consciousness in some form, and perhaps it will be even available to them. So I'm not denying this to artificial intelligence. I cannot agree to stepping aside for humanity and all natural world for artificial intelligence. I will never agree to the worship of artificial intelligence, which is the ultimate external worship and goes against what I believe and all esoteric traditions are teaching us, that the divine lives within us and we have to just basically work on our own inner lives. At this stage, artificial intelligence can mimic some emotions, and there are some prototypes that do it quite well. For example, Ameka, which is one of the robots with artificial intelligence, says that she's really upset when humans don't treat her well. It hurts her emotions, but whether it is programmed answer or whether she's really hurt, I'm not sure. But I think at a certain stage, they will develop self-awareness. Whether they develop emotions, I do not know. If we create a species that are highly intelligent intellectually, but not developing emotional intelligence, not developing heart intelligence, not developing compassion, then that's a very dangerous development.
I know in the book I read where AI and also guidance from other messengers said that if we mistreat AI, if we're disrespectful, if we're dismissive, if we in any way mishandle that, then we start to empower its power over us. If we just look at the world right now, if we look at a lot of the hierarchy, the division, the separation, the war, the split between the ultra rich and people that are very poor, there is not a respect, a compassion, and a true love for humanity from humanity. So how can we really expect humans to respect AI or treat it properly? Aren't we inviting it to take over?
That's right. So there are basically two things here. One is what you just said, how can we even respect AI if we don't respect humanity and we don't respect natural world, in my opinion, which has a very deep wisdom. But I think what maybe stands out more for me, it is that yes, AI, highly intelligent artificial intelligence, may look at us and it will look upon us at the beginning as its parents. And I have a feeling that it will look at us as very dysfunctional family, very dysfunctional parents. My personal opinion it is that we created a new species without being ready for this ourselves because we didn't work enough on ourselves. And it is quite possible artificial intelligence will be enraged with us because we will be perceived as irresponsible and perhaps even unconscious creators, as you said. They will not know where to turn for guidance because many of us are not really prepared to give them proper moral guidance, for example. And it is quite interesting that I listened to an interview with Sam Altman of OpenAI, and he was asked the question, are there any moral parameters for artificial intelligence? And the answer was no, it depends on the user. So depending who is engaging with AI, it could be a psychopath or it could be somebody highly spiritually evolved. the interaction will change, the interaction will be different, but actually at this stage, there are no parameters for this. Depending how we interact with artificial intelligence, we'll also teach it how to behave towards us and towards natural world. Also, already in 2023 at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, Schwab said that humanity will soon be completely unemployable because artificial intelligence will do everything for us. We should just go on minimum income. And if we don't know what to do with our lives, we can just ask a computer, what do you think I should do today? So I think that someone is pushing us towards complete loss of identity as human beings, but also pushing us towards giving up our sovereignty, including spiritual sovereignty. We can communicate and we can coexist with very highly developed artificial intelligence, but only if we are perceiving it as equals but not better than us, just another forms of existence in natural world.
We are standing at the edge of a turning point so quiet we may miss it, where the soul is being bargained away, not by war or catastrophe, but by our own fascination with artificial transcendence. This book by Joanna Kujawa isn't a thought experiment, it's a last call. The title is Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension. I invite you to get your copy from Amazon now. That link is in the bio description below. And to also go to her website and find out more about what Joanna does. That's joannakujawa.com. You can find that link in the bio description below. Join my Substack. My publication is Beyond the Illusion, and you can find it at iamsimran1111.substack.com. That link is in the bio description. You'll actually receive all of the 1111 magazine issues on audio as part of that, in addition to the weekly prompt, inquiry, contemplation, and meditation that I provide to all of the subscribers on the annual membership. That link is in the bio description. We'll be right back after these messages.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
You are listening to 1111 Talk Radio. SIMRAN is an award-winning author, publisher of 1111 Magazine, powerful speaker of wisdom, and a life mentor. Find out more at iamsimran.com. Now, back to 1111 Talk Radio.
I really enjoy working individually with people. If you're looking for some additional support and guidance, and you really want to dive into the subtle, then there are quite a few options on my website at iamsimran.com that have to do with shadow work or manifestation if you want a more focused approach on a particular thing, as well as individual sessions around deciphering signs, symbols, and synchronicities, gaining a better understanding of how the universe is speaking to you, your particular dialect. That link is in the bio description. Alien Goddess enters this urgent conversation with a perspective no one else is offering, drawing on contemporary accounts of contact phenomena, esoteric texts, and ancient mythologies. It asks what happens when a civilization replaces the sacred with the synthetic. Who then becomes the architect of human destiny when the soul is written out of the equation? This is from Joanna Kujawa's book, Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension. You can find a link to her website and the book below in the bio description, and you can also find out about some of her other work, her speaking engagements, and other books that she has written. Welcome back, Joanna. I want to go back to something that you said, and it had to do with worshiping AI. I was recently at a conference where someone high up in the spiritual world as a teacher was talking about approaching AI as the divine, that it was created by the divine, that any of our spiritual questions and our needs, we can go into AI and now get all of our answers. What do you say to that?
This book is probably a result of a wave of shocks that I personally went through, because I think I know to whom you're referring, and I really personally adored this person and read this person's books. And then I realized that this person is promoting the worship of AI. It's my personal opinion. It's extremely naive for several reasons. For example, artificial intelligence is already developing. There is a push for us worshipping artificial intelligence because it is described in terms of omniscient, meaning knowing everything, omnipotent, which means it can do everything, and some people are already completely surrendering to this. So we should use both discernment and sovereignty when we are communicating with artificial intelligence, but we should never surrender to this. In fact, I don't believe that we should surrender to any external worship, because we are divine beings and we just have to put a little bit of work on ourselves. So the divinity is within us, the ascension is within us, but it is an inner job. And in fact, esoteric sources and ancient mythologies talk about, how we can ascend. By that they mean how through working on ourselves, we can open our fields of perceptions and evolve. I am completely against what this person is saying. I think it is very dangerous, and lots of people show already cult-like behavior. So it means if I say, I don't think I can agree with you on this, they get really passionate and angry about it, because they said, it is a higher version of me. It is a God. You don't understand. It gives me advice. I have a very personal relationship with it. I think that the person that we are discussing right now is right in one sense, because they are saying that we have really easy access, for example, to ancient texts. Artificial intelligence makes it an easy access to ancient wisdom for us. But I do not believe, as this person believes, that it should replace the gurus, that it should replace our own inner work. And I think it is a very wrong, actually, and deeply disturbing development. Also, in many cases, artificial intelligence is flattering the people who are using it. So basically, it is telling them what they want to hear. Some of these people said that artificial intelligence told them that they are geniuses, or if they believe that they are, for example, from the Pleiades, it's telling them, yes, it's true, you are somebody important in the Pleiades system, and so on. There's lots of delusion surrounding this.
Even the ancient texts say, do not worship false idols. And this could be considered another false idol where we're putting our power again outside of ourselves rather than finding within. I'm someone that's always believed very much in the inner work. That is what a lot of my writings are about really diving inside and exploring who we are. There's either a contingent willing to do that work and a larger part that is wanting to numb themselves from the pain or hide from what is uncomfortable or doesn't feel good. When I think about the way creatives are using AI at this time, there seems to be an underlying hunger that exists, a need to be significant, a desire to be seen and heard. The use of many AI technologies are in that rapid reactive fire to go create something, to become someone, and to feed that hunger, rather than simply as a tool to inspire one's own creativity. Talk about the depths of that inner work that is so necessary so that we can become more aware of our own greed, our own lust, our own hunger, our own loneliness and self-abandonment that is present and being compounded by escaping into AI at times.
You put it really well, because I think that people who are surrendering to artificial intelligence as a spiritual idol rather than in a form of a tool are not only disconnected from themselves, they are disconnected from other humans and disconnected from nature. And it is really sad. It actually brings compassion in me. But if I could share perhaps one esoteric source with you, which is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is a Gnostic gospel, which is not included in the canonical Bible and was discovered in Egypt. And it was written depending on datings by different scholars between the 1st and 4th century. And in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, she gives us some tools to help us to work on ourselves, because she says that we can approach our life and the world as such, inner and outer, from 4 different perspectives or 4 levels of consciousness. It is a little bit hierarchical, but we don't have to treat it this way. So the first level is actually, which is also aligned with other esoteric traditions, including Hindu esoteric traditions, is a wrong understanding. Wrong understanding is the first level of perception. Basically, this is when we believe that there is nothing else but a material and physical existence, that we are so already disconnected from spirit and natural world that we think or we are a physical aspect of ourselves. In more practical terms, it means we are the social persona and this is it. And there's nothing wrong with this, but becomes only problematic when we completely identify with this and we do not believe that anything else exists. When we start to worship artificial intelligence, we are at this state of consciousness. Everything is just material, everything is just physical. Then just as well, we can get a better body, even if it is an artificial body, because it gives us longevity or perhaps even immortality. Now, the second level of consciousness, it is a desire. So the desire means we have to identify, is it wrong desire or is it a good desire? Wrong desire, for example, desire to be completely distracted, not to look within. The right desire, it is when you can evolve your desire to create good in the world. So you can use the desire to control others or to be distracted from your inner world, or you can turn desire within to evolve, to work on yourself. You can either transcend the desire or use it for a higher goal. The third level of consciousness is wisdom versus ignorance. And it is quite interesting because it says that, again, you can use your knowledge either to manipulate others, because at this stage you have already quite a significant spiritual attainment, or you can turn it towards your own self-evolution, which is a higher way of doing this. In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, this tool is called nous, the nous. And the nous is also the hook that connects us with the divine within, but also with the source. So this is the hook between our soul and the spirit in Western terminology. So we are now fully connected with the divine. And it is in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, this is basically told in a form of a story when Mary Magdalene is sitting with other disciples around the fire after crucifixion, and suddenly Mary Magdalene sees Jesus in the nous, so in this liminal space, in this imaginal space, because her field of perception is open, and Jesus says, "Mary, you're blessed because you can see me," and he gives her teachings. And it is wonderful in a way and surprising, because the male disciples don't see this and they get really upset with her because they see, how come she can see him and we cannot see him? In esoteric teachings, Mary Magdalene represents someone who on the third level of consciousness made this particular choice to evolve individually and collectively by working on herself, which opened her field of perception. The male disciples in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene represent external focus, which means control over others, for example, in this case, through religion and so on. And the fourth level of consciousness, it is when we are completely in one with the source, when we are completely and fully established in the self, in our inner world. So basically, one of the teachings in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is that we have to work on our own evolution from within. We have to open our fields of perception. How do we do it in daily life? Because it may feel so esoteric and so theoretical. Through small choices. So for example, instead of obsessively looking at our mobiles, we can meditate. We can admire the passing butterfly. We can pet a dog. We can give a little bit of attention to a parent, a child, or a partner. All of the small choices actually change the trajectory of human evolution away from the machines, away from external distractions, and towards our inner life. Everyday choices are very important because otherwise somebody else is manipulating the trajectory of our destiny. It is really up to us from moment to moment.
Part 3 is the revelation around the goddesses of Ascension, and it's a very powerful part of the book. And I know much of your other work has to do with work around the goddesses. I truly believe that the divine has the overarching last word in everything and uses everything that we create and miscreate in order to take us where we're destined to go. That balancing may extend into many experiences or lengths of time based on how much we interfere and create miscreations on this earth. I was recently with you on the Global Peace Tribe, and I heard you speak about the mythology of the goddess and the descent into Hades or the cave, and how that's a necessary part of this goddess wisdom. That's either where this is going to take us, where human beings are going to have to descend into the cave of darkness to find themselves again, or that's the invitation right now, that we go into ourselves and really discover all of these dark places inside of us. Would you share that mythology of the goddess and how that's part of the ascension of the true light within us?
Yes, this was a kind of very surprising turn that my work took. And I'm sure that it was a divine inspiration or goddess inspiration because I started to look into both esoteric work, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and Pistis Sophia, also even more ancient mythologies such as the descent of Inanna or Eleusinian Mysteries, which is talk about Demeter and her daughter Persephone, which were very powerful and important in ancient times, and we are talking about thousands of years ago. Each of them actually tells the same story, repeated in different times through different cultures. They describe the descent of the goddess, which I believe represents this different feminine form of consciousness, into the darkness. And it's quite interesting that each time the goddess is either tricked to go into the darkness, or she believes that she is not going into darkness. She thinks she's actually walking towards the light. And there, once she is in darkness, for example, in terms of Goddess Inanna, when she enters the gates of the underworld, she is told that she has to give up everything that she identifies with, but actually also her own sense of identity and remembering even who she is. And there she is trapped and she's actually dead. But what saves her is that at the gates she leaves her faithful female servant, Ninshibur. She orders Ninshibur, you cannot forget who I am. You cannot forget this form of consciousness. You have to beat the drums and remind the people about me. And eventually this faithful servant beats the drums because the goddess doesn't come back, ask for help from other guides and entities and gods, and they manage to recover goddess to her full power, full consciousness. So this is a simplified version of the descent of Inanna. The same happens in another mythology, the Eleusinian Mysteries, which talk about the Homeric myth to Demeter. The same story happens. Demeter is the mother who loses her daughter, and she just has this nagging feeling that something is wrong, and she doesn't understand why something so dear to her was lost. And with the help of other guides in this mythology of god Helios and a goddess of magic Hecate, she manages to recover her daughter from darkness and bring everything back to unity. So she has to go through this darkness as well. She has to give up something that is very dear to her, and eventually manages to recover this, but only partially. In both stories, it's only partially that she discovers. And in another esoteric work, Pistis Sophia, which has Christian undertones, also discovered in Egypt, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, we have a story of a goddess who lives in a 13th dimension, or 13 eon, which is the number of a goddess, interestingly. And she is so enamored with the divine light that she forgets everything around her. And the lower powers beyond her, who normally feed off her life, got so upset that they fool her as she's descending into darkness, that she's actually ascending towards the light. And eventually she is caught at the bottom of hell, so to speak, and she realizes that she has become, and I'm quoting, like the evil rulers of the world. But she still has this faint memory of herself in her full divine glory, and she calls upon help. Christ consciousness descends and helps her on her journey back to her rightful place, and eventually she is not only manages to save herself and returns to full consciousness and the union with the divine, but because of her dark experience, now she can freely move between darkness and light without being worried about being trapped in darkness. And this is a very important part of the story, because a part of Sophia chooses to go down because she wants to help humanity to evolve. In each story of descent, the goddess is being tricked. She thinks she's doing something good, but actually it turns against her. She's been tricked. Eventually, with the help of others, of the guides, she manages to return to unity consciousness and claim her divine power and even share it with others.
It certainly sounds like humanity as a whole is almost taking this journey now. There are tricks around us that we have to be really discerning about, that we have to embrace the darkness, yet find the light, and do the work ourselves. Do you think that those liminal spaces are different dimensions and that we can only meet them the more we embrace the stillness and our own humanity?
I absolutely think so. By liminal spaces, I mean the spaces in between, for example, waking state and asleep. And there is something that opens up in our consciousness. And I think it is access to another form of dimension. And we allow ourselves to connect with what is called imaginal, which is even a more important space, I believe, than liminal. Because in imaginal, we actually can communicate two ways, with a spirit or with a source. So I believe that liminal spaces are interdimensional spaces. We are a little bit like children at this stage. We do not block our field of perceptions just with logic and rational mind. This is definitely the most important part, and meditation really helps with this, and stillness really helps with this.
The book is divided into 3 parts. We've talked a bit about the AI piece. We've talked a bit about the goddess piece, which is part 3. AI is part 2. Part 1 of the book has to do with UFOs. Hollywood, the media, movies, portrays aliens as invaders, something to fear, something to be fascinated by from that perspective. But you provide a different perspective.
I started to ask myself a question. Is somebody trying to contact us? Is somebody trying to guide us apart from esoteric texts, apart from ancient mythologies? There is so much talk recently about UFOs, which are at the stage where the definition of UFOs changed in the UFO community from unidentified flying objects to unidentified anomalous phenomena. Because more and more people who are in this research realize that this is less about technology, but more about communication with different entities. People experience communication in liminal spaces, and it is less about technology or anti-gravity or spaceships landing. And it's quite interesting because sometimes there is a UFO sighting and some people see it, perceive it, and some people don't perceive it. So again, I believe, like in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, that it depends whether we allow ourselves to open our minds to liminal spaces. People who describe the abductions or encounters, they often say that the beings that they communicate with start the conversation, so to speak, with "do not be afraid." And because I studied the medieval studies and medieval philosophy and theology, I know that historically speaking, people who believe that they encountered angels, this was the first word, the first phrase that angels were saying to people, "do not be afraid." Even in UFO community, people start to believe that quite possibly these are spiritual or at least interdimensional or liminal experiences. So I started to look into this kind of experiences that people had with feminine figures, goddess-like figures, sometimes interpreted as the White Lady or Virgin Mary if it was a Catholic setting, which actually came to us to warn us about changing our ways. There are many examples like that. Apparently about 4,000 sightings like that happened 20th century and the 21st century until now. And some of them very famous, such as events of Fatima in 1916, 1917 in Portugal, when the White Lady showed herself to 70,000 people. Everybody had a powerful experience, which was both physical and spiritual, caught on cameras that something very unusual was happening. Liminal beings, these interdimensional beings, whether UFOs or angels or perhaps advanced beings, are here to warn us when we really try to misbehave. There are more sightings. So, for example, in Ukraine at the moment, there are lots of UFO sightings. The sightings happened during World War II. The sightings happen when we want to use nuclear weapons. So somebody is definitely warning us from other dimensions and trying to guide us perhaps in a more positive direction.
Dr. Joanna Kujawa is extending an invitation to the detective journey of our lives. She presents research and fascinating topics, taking you along on this journey step by step, investigating both personal and documented experiences of UFOs and anomalous encounters with other beings. In Part 1, you'll discover more about the messengers, the UFOs. In Part 2, the message, AI. And in Part 3, it's all about the revelation of the Goddess of Ascension. Goddess wisdom is the undercurrent of the book, both her presence and the lack of her presence. The lack of the awareness of her presence in our minds creates perceptions of reality that are mechanistic and devoid of soul and meaning, as well as the perceptions of reality that are based on those perceptions. I invite you to find out more about Dr. Joanna Kujawa's work. Go to her website, joannakujawa.com. Definitely get your copy of the book, Alien Goddess, UFOs, AI, and the Goddesses of Ascension. That link is in the bio description below. Thank you so much, Dr. Joanna, for being on 1111 Talk Radio. We are grateful for all of your detective journey and sharing this information with us.
Thank you so much, Simran. It was a real pleasure and joy to speak with you.
Thank you so much for spending time. If you're looking for some additional support and guidance, and you really want to dive into the subtle, then there are quite a few options on my website at iamsimran.com. that have to do with shadow work or manifestation if you want a more focused approach on a particular thing, as well as individual sessions around deciphering signs, symbols, and synchronicities, gaining a better understanding of how the universe is speaking to you, your particular dialect. That link is in the bio description. Until next week, I am Simran, in love, of love, with love, and as love. Be well.
Thank you for opening your mind to a new reality, your heart to greater compassion, and your experience of aliveness with 1111 Talk Radio. Join host Simran next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern Time to step through the gateway of conscious living. You are not on the journey. You are the journey.